Welcome, everyone. We're diving deep today into something pretty fascinating, the creation narrative from the book of Genesis.
Oh, yeah, one of those stories that just seems to stick with you no matter what.
Exactly.
Mm.
So we'll be looking at excerpts from the first chapter, those 7 days of creation, that have really shaped how we think about, well, everything.
I mean, talk about a lasting impact.
Seriously. And it's incredible how these ancient verses still resonate with us today, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's remarkable how they've influenced art, literature, philosophical debates for centuries.
Just like they tap into something fundamental about the human experience.
For sure, like that opening line, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Just such a powerful image.
So powerful. This sense of nothingness before creation begins. It's almost unsettling.
It really is. And it's not just a random detail either. This whole theme of order emerging from chaos.
Yeah.
You see that in a lot of ancient creation myths.
Oh, interesting. So it's speaking to something deeper than just the physical act of creation.
Exactly. It's about imposing order on the unknown, finding meaning in the face of the void, this primal need to make sense of where everything came from.
I see. So then on day one, we have this dramatic shift. God speaks and light bursts forth. It's like the first step in establishing that order.
And that light becomes the foundation for everything that follows. Life growth, understanding, you name it.
Then on day two, things get a bit more structured with the creation of the firmament separating the waters above from the waters below.
Right, the firmament, I always picture this giant dome over the earth when I read that.
Me too. Like a solid ceiling holding back the celestial waters.
Exactly, and that's how ancient cultures often understood the sky. It may not be scientifically accurate today, but it's a really poetic way to describe the cosmos as they knew it.
Their way of explaining what they observed and creating a sense of order and stability.
Exactly, you have the heavens above the earth below, and this clear division between them.
And then on day three, things get really interesting. Land appears and vegetation just explodes onto the scene.
Talk about abundance and vitality. It goes from barren rock to a world teeming with plants in the blink of an eye.
It really makes you appreciate the significance of plant life.
Right.
I mean, where would we be without it?
Right. The basis of our entire ecosystem. Oxygen, food, shelter, they're essential for pretty much everything.
And this is where the text introduces the concept of kinds, the first mention of distinct species.
Recognizing that incredible diversity of life flourishing on this newly formed land.
But then day four always trips me up. The sun, moon, and stars are created after the plants. Wouldn't plants need sunlight to survive?
You're not alone. It's a detail that sparked a lot of debate. Some think it's symbolic, emphasizing the importance of light in a metaphorical sense, perhaps divine light before physical light.
So it's a statement about the unique nature of this creation story.
Exactly. It's saying this is how we see the order of things.
Okay, so we've got light structure, this burst of plant life. Then day five brings even more abundance with creatures in the waters and the skies. It's like the world is overflowing with life at this point.
And not just the sheer number, but the vivid language the text uses to describe them. Fish swarming, birds soaring. It's just an incredible image.
And there's that recurring emphasis on God's blessing, be fruitful and multiply. It's like this drive toward growth and continuity is built in from the very beginning.
It's not just about creating life, it's about ensuring its continuation, its flourishing.
Then things really ramp up on day six, land animals of all shapes and sizes, and then finally humankind. It's like the culmination of the entire creation process.
The climax. And it all hinges on that pivotal statement. Let us make man in our image after our likeness. This concept of the Imago Dei has been debated for centuries.
It really makes you think about what sets humans apart from the rest of creation.
What does it mean to bear the image of the divine? Our reason, creativity, moral conscience.
So many possibilities. And right alongside that idea of Imago Dei comes dominion. Humans given authority over all other living things.
And with that comes huge responsibility. Are we stewards caring for the planet, or are we meant to exploit it for our own game?
It's a tension that's woven into the creation narrative itself. The harmony of the Garden of Eden, where humans live in balance with nature, versus the potential for disruption.
This beautiful world given as a gift, and it's up to us to decide how we'll treat it.
And those choices have consequences.
Yeah.
But we still have one more day to cover.
Right. Day 7, after all that creating God rests.
Taking a deep breath after an incredibly busy week.
And the establishment of the Sabbath, a day of rest, is incredibly significant. It emphasizes completion reflection, setting aside time for something beyond the material world.
It's amazing how much depth and meaning is packed into these verses, and we've only just scratched the surface.
It's true. And that's the power of this narrative. It speaks to such fundamental aspects of the human experience that it continues to resonate with us even thousands of years later.
So where do we fit in? What does it mean to be human in this grand scheme of things? What are our responsibilities to each other and to the planet?
Big questions, and I think those are the questions we need to keep asking ourselves. Genesis gives us a framework, but not necessarily all the answers.
More like a starting point for a much larger conversation.
Precisely. And that's a conversation each of us needs to participate in.
So as you listen it, think about what resonates with you. What questions come up? How does this inform your understanding of the world and your place in it?
We'll be exploring some of these questions in more depth as we continue, but for now, just sit with these ideas. Let them percolate. You might be surprised at the insights you discover. It's fascinating how the Genesis creation narrative has been interpreted in so many different ways throughout history. It's like this rich tapestry of ideas.
That's a great analogy. It makes sense considering how much this story touches on those big universal questions like, where did we come from? What's our purpose, good and evil?
Exactly. It speaks to the very core of the human experience. It's been fertile ground for artists, writers, theologians, philosophers, you name it.
We could spend hours just talking about all the different interpretations out there. But maybe you could give us a few examples, like how have people reimagined these stories over time?
Oh, there's so many, but one that comes to mind is Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling. I'm sure you've seen images of it, those scenes from Genesis, like the creation of Adam.
God's finger reaching out to touch man's nap.
Yeah.
It's so iconic. Even if you don't know the story behind it, you recognize that image.
Right. It speaks to the enduring power of this narrative. Michelangelo took this ancient text and made it into this incredibly moving work of art.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And another example that comes to mind is John Milton's Paradise Lost, focusing on the fall of humanity and the struggle between good and evil.
It's a retelling of the Genesis story, but with a twist. Reinterpreting those themes for a new audience.
And Milton's work had a huge impact on English literature, shaping how people viewed the Genesis narrative.
Absolutely. It shows how these stories continue to evolve and resonate across cultures and time.
Speaking of different interpretations, one thing that always comes up is the debate about the days of creation.
Ah, yes. The literal versus symbolic interpretation of those days. Some believe they were 24-hour periods, others see them as vast eras.
That's a big one. It highlights the challenges of interpreting ancient texts within a modern scientific context.
Right. The Hebrew word for day can have multiple meanings, and the text itself uses it in various ways, so it's not always clear-cut.
How do you think modern science and a literal interpretation of Genesis can coexist? They're often presented as being at odds.
It's definitely complex, and there are people on both sides who see it as an either, but many believe that faith and science can coexist and even enrich each other.
So it's not about choosing one over the other.
Exactly. There are varying viewpoints. Some believe evolution is the mechanism God used to create diversity. Others hold to a more literal interpretation.
It's about finding a way to reconcile different perspectives and ways of understanding the world.
Precisely. And that's where open dialogue and respect becomes so important. Not about convincing everyone to agree, but understanding different viewpoints and finding common ground.
Earlier, we talked about dominion, humans having authority over living things. And you mentioned it raises ethical questions about our responsibility to the earth. Do you think that idea has been misinterpreted over time?
It's definitely been subject to a lot of different interpretations and applications, and I think it's fair to say it's been used to justify exploitation in some cases.
Like, we have dominion over nature, so we can use it however we want without considering the consequences.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
It's like we've forgotten that we're part of nature, not separate from it. We're interconnected with all living things.
That's a crucial point, and I think the Genesis narrative hints at that interconnectedness.
Yeah.
Remember the Garden of Eden, humans living in harmony with nature.
Exactly. We're not meant to be rulers of creation, but stewards, caretakers of this incredible gift.
It makes you wonder how our relationship with the natural world would be different if we focused on that initial harmony. Maybe we'd be more mindful of our impact on the environment.
It's an interesting thought experiment, and it speaks to the relevance of the Genesis narrative. Even though it's ancient, it challenges us to rethink our assumptions and live more sustainably.
So it's not just a story about the past, but also about the present and the future.
Exactly. It's a narrative that continues to unfold, and we're all part of writing the next chapter.
And as we write that next chapter, we should remember those lessons about balance, harmony, and interconnectedness.
Absolutely. We have a responsibility to learn from the past, be mindful of the present, and make choices that create a more sustainable and harmonious future for all.
You know, as we've been talking about all this, the interpretations, the ethical questions, I've been struck by this sense of hopefulness that runs through it all.
Hopefulness. I don't think I've thought about it that way. What do you mean?
Well, it starts with that image of pure potential in the beginning.
Hmm.
The world being formless and void, and then boom, like life beauty, it all bursts forth.
Ah, I see what you're saying. It's like
Ah,
even out of chaos, something incredible can emerge.
exactly. And even when humans mess up, which the story definitely acknowledges, there's still this underlying belief in creation's inherent goodness.
Yeah, like that phrase, and God saw that it was good. It's repeated throughout the creation account.
And then finally God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. It's like this challenge to see the world through a lens of wonder, appreciate its value, even with all the difficulties.
I like that, focusing on the good, even amidst the complexities of life.
It's like an invitation to approach the world with a sense of curiosity and awe, like we're rediscovering it all for the first time.
Yes. Reclaiming that childlike sense of wonder,
Yeah.
recognizing the extraordinary in the ordinary.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Genesis, where do we go from here? What do we do with all these insights and questions?
Well, I think that's where the real work begins. It's up to each of us to take these ideas and make them our own, to wrestle with those ethical questions, consider our responsibility to the planet, and find ways to live in a way that honors that interconnectedness.
It's about taking this ancient story and allowing it to inform our present and inspire our future.
Exactly. And even though it's an ancient text, it still has the power to challenge us and guide us on that journey.
It's a story that continues to unfold, and we're all part of it.
We really are.
So as you go about your day, think about all this. Look around. See the world with fresh eyes. Ponder those big questions about where we came from, where we're going, how we can make this world a little bit better.
You might just find your own unique interpretation of this timeless story.
That's the beauty of it. It's a conversation that never ends.